I previously have not gone over other big free agency moves for other teams, but some crazy stuff happened in this previous offseason that I feel is important to mention for the context of this league. Remember how the Portland Trail Blazers haven't been good in the past after the Embiid trade? Yeah, well, they signed Bradley frickin' Beal, so their starting lineup is now Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal, Josh Richardson, who they also signed Nazir Little, who's a great role player at this point, and Joel Embiid. The Blazers went to work this offseason, and I think they're going to be damn good now. No more 9th seeds for them. Also, Kawhi Leonard is on the OKC Thunder, which is interesting. They wouldn't seem like a big threat, but it is Kawhi on a decent team, so they can be something. And then most importantly, within our own conference is the Toronto Raptors, who signed James Harden. They were a decent team, and then they add one of the best players in the league. So they're a legit threat to our title hopes. But let's look at the team you are here for, the Philadelphia 76ers. This roster, I noticed after the PG trade, literally only has one rotation player on it that was there from the start. That player obviously being Ben Simmons. I actually planned on this not being the case, wanting to keep Maxey and Thibault, and then I'd do a sign and trade for Paul George, but then in real life he signed an extension, which meant I had to give more than I was originally planning to make it make sense. But anyways, Paul George is now on the team, and that is all that matters. Our starting lineup now looks like Drew Holiday, CJ McCollum, Paul George, Jeremy Grant, and Ben Simmons, with Goran Dragic, Gary Trent, PJ Tucker, and Aaron Baines for the bench unit. Let's run down this roster and once more lay down my expectations for every player going into this season. Drew is not going to be much of a scorer on this team. As I said with Drew last year, I wanted him to be more aggressive because CJ wasn't a good enough shot creator to carry that part of our offense alone. But with PG here now, I kind of just want Drew to act like basically a point guard Draymond Green, if that makes sense, where his focus is defense, playmaking, and I'd also want him to stretch the floor, which is where that comparison really ends. But Drew is not going to be a big time scorer on this team, but his impact is certainly going to be felt outside of the box score. CJ has now reverted to a third option where I expect him to take a few more threes, like probably 10 a game. He was hovering around 7 to 8 the last 2 years, but he'll have a less on-ball role with this team now that PG is here. Also, his numbers will probably drop to like 18 points or so in this reduced role, but that's perfectly fine with me. For PG himself, I also expect him to launch around 10 threes a game, but of course, I also want him to create off of the dribble and average like 23 to 25 or so points a game. Grant, 3 and D, occasionally creating off of the dribble. Keep doing that. And for Ben Simmons, he's not going to repeat his MVP because I think Paul will take a good amount of shots from him. However, I do think because of that, he can really turn his focus onto the defense. In years 1 and 2, Ben finished 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting both times. This year, I think he can win it. Also, dude, just average more than 6 assists again. I don't know what that was about last year, but don't do that. On top of that, Ben's 3-point rating is now up to like a 68 through more training camp, so I think he can shoot around 32% from 3. I don't think any of that's all that consequential to the success of this team, but I think it would be nice. For the bench unit, I like Dragic to average around 10 points and 4 assists on good efficiency. Gary Trent will get similar minutes to what he did last year, so his numbers should be roughly the same, though I don't necessarily expect him to maintain that ridiculous 45+% 3-point percentage. PJ needs to just be 3 and D, and Aaron Baines just keep being the greatest player of all time. As for the team as a whole, I understand I haven't done this at the start of the last 2 seasons, but I genuinely mean it this time. I would like to apologize to the rest of the teams in the league who have to score against this team, because while in the last 2 years we have won the title of the best defensive team in the league, we had 2 holes in the starting lineup. CJ is a bad defender, and Gary Trent is just a passable one, and with him playing small forward, he often wasn't even that depending on the matchup. But now, while CJ is still bad defensively, we replace that okay undersized defender in Trent in the starting lineup with someone who is 4 inches taller, who is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. As I mentioned last offseason when I added Jeremy Grant, size was an issue for us previous to adding Grant, and after that, it was still slightly a problem when we ran into teams like the Lakers or the Bucks who had a lot of size. But now with PG, our starting lineup's average height is 6'7", which is the league average, so there is no size issue with this team. If only that was the case with me. Offensively, in the shooting department, Paul George replacing Trent in the starting lineup is only a mild improvement because Gary Trent was an amazing shooter last year, but Trent is now coming off of the bench, which means our bench shooting has improved a good bit. On top of that, Dragic is replacing Maxey. That's a shooting upgrade. Also, PJ is about as good of a shooter as Tobias from outside so long as he stays in the corner. So I think our shooting has overall improved a good amount. We have 2 guys in the starting lineup who can shoot 10 threes a game very efficiently, and a guy on the bench who can shoot 7 to sometimes even 10 very efficiently. On top of that shooting, the shot creation has improved a lot. I said it a second ago, but CJ is going from the second option to the third, and that's pretty awesome. Not because CJ isn't good enough to be a very good second option, but precisely because he is. Having a guy of that caliber as your third option is awesome. And on top of that, Drew and Trent are kind of combining for our fourth option, and both of those guys are awesome. I asked on Twitter, and Drew Holiday might actually be the greatest fourth option of all time, so that's certainly interesting. Also, with the rotation for this team, previously there was about a 2 to 3 minute stretch in the start of the fourth quarter where I'd run a full bench unit so I could balance the stamina of the starters. I couldn't find a way to take out one of Drew, CJ, or Ben out long enough without it being a detriment to where one of them could play the whole fourth quarter, and that hurt us at the start of the fourth quarter. But with PG added, I think I'm gonna have CJ be the guy who plays the entire fourth quarter. He'll play only like one half of the third so that I'll never have to run a full bench lineup. That's why I didn't bother signing a backup small forward, because Trent will just play small forward while CJ is at the 2. And overall with this offense, last season we were the number 7 offense in the league, which was good, but we can 100% be a top 5 offense now. I'd even say we could crack into the top 3. And then obviously I expect to be the number 1 defense in the league yet again. So the best defense in the NBA and no worse than a top 5 offense. I don't know about y'all, but that sounds like a championship team in my book. And for me, that is the expectation for this team. I wouldn't say championship or bust. However, I would definitely say championship or I'll be sad, I guess. But that's enough talk. Let's actually start this season. All right, so our first game of the season is against the Toronto Raptors, the team that I mentioned has James Harden. On this play, just give it a second. Eventually, I'm going to pull that shot, and that's the first bucket that I got with Paul George. I sometimes do that and completely screw up clips because I'm like waiting to see if the defender is going to step up, and then they don't. But I had to show that one because it was Paul George's first bucket as a Sixer. Gets that fadeaway there to get his second one. James Harden takes him to the rack, and Paul George played great defense on him there. It just did not matter. But a luxury that I realized was that I kind of have 3 defenders on this team that I can slap on anybody other than like a center outside of Ben Simmons, because Paul George can defend 1 through 4, Jeremy Grant can defend 1 through 4, and then Ben Simmons can defend 1 through 5. So this defense is very versatile, a bunch of good size, a bunch of amazing defensive ability. I'm just very excited for what this team can bring defensively, even more so than what it can bring offensively, because over the last few years, we have been one of the best defenses in the NBA as PJ Tucker greens this three-pointer out of the corner for his first bucket as a Sixer, and Goran Dragic is going to get his own as well right here off of the screen from Baines. But while we've been the best defense in the league, there were often times where I struggled with defense for this team just because some of the one-on-one matchups were not amazing, and the simulation Sixers defense was a little bit better than the Sixers defense when I played the games. Missed a 3 by Baines right there, but then Dragic gets this steal on Fred VanVleet and dishes it to Baines, who gets the dunk. So now that we have this defensive personnel that's improved even further, I think even in games we can be the best defense in the league, not just in simulation. Nice tip dunk there by Ben Simmons. But right now we have a close battle with the Toronto Raptors. This is a team that I fear quite a bit in this conference. Because it was already a good team and now they added James Harden. But we're going to show some of our defense in this sequence to end the half, because we get a couple of stops in a row that lead to some easy buckets, because that's been the identity of this team, is defense to offense. We got that steal there, another steal here by Drew Holiday, who picks Harden on the drive. Then Grant dishes this one to Ben Simmons, who's trailing, and he gets the easy dunk. Then on this play, Grant switches on to James Harden and then runs over and blocks Chris Boucher on the pick and roll action. So that was a very good recovery right there. And then another dunk there for Ben Simmons. He's gotten 6 easy points right there. Very good contest by Jeremy Grant on the Harden step back, grabs the long rebound. And while this fast break was a little sloppy, it still results in an easy 2 points. So our defense really came through to end this half to blow this game open a little bit, but to close it, don't get a stop right there as James Harden loses Paul George with the spin move. But Paul George had 14 at the first half. This three-pointer right there by CJ. There's parts of this where it's like difficult to really figure out what I want to do with George in this offense and trying to balance the amount of shots. For instance, in this game, CJ got a good amount of shots. They just weren't amazing looks because for the most part, Paul George was getting a lot of the easy looks. So I'm going to have to figure out how to really balance that to make sure CJ isn't getting left out of the offense. But I'm also taking full advantage of Paul George and the fact that he's just a better scorer. Nice drive there by Malik Beasley, who's coming off of this team's bench, which is a very nice thing for their depth. I really fear this team. Dragic with this three-pointer off of the catch from Ben Simmons, so he's acclimating well into this offense, getting some catch-and-shoot options, and he's been good in the pick-and-roll as well. Malachi Flynn, I believe that guy's name is, he gets that fadeaway short jump shot to go. Ben Simmons, he draws the double, and Paul George gets the wide open three-pointer as a result of that. And then Ben Simmons with the spin move on Hassan Whiteside dishes it to Gary Trent, who greens that three-pointer. Anytime Gary Trent scores, I'm going to show it in the highlights. That's just the rules. Nice dunk there by Paul George to close out the third quarter off of the screen from Ben Simmons. That's going to be a big foundation of our offense, the Paul George, Ben Simmons pick and roll. But as you see right here, Toronto is starting to get back in this game. This shot right here will make that 3 straight three-pointers for the Houston Rockets to get right back in this game. We got another bucket, but then Harden drives and matches it once more. CJ with the bad mid-range pull-up that doesn't drop. I was just not getting easy looks for him in this game. Subbing the starters in, but James Harden gets this quick three-pointer before they can get in. So Toronto actually has the lead now. I jumped too early with Ben Simmons, and he gets that dunk on the backdoor cut. And then Drew Holiday with this three-pointer over Fred VanVleet. That gets the lead a little bit smaller. I almost said gets the load a little bit smaller. Pause on that one for sure. Jeremy Grant with Fred VanVleet on him. Anytime I get a mismatch with Grant, I like to take advantage of it because I just like scoring with Jeremy Grant. What can I say? But Fred VanVleet taking this one to the basket on Drew. He gets that floater. Ben Simmons gets in the paint. Hassan Whiteside is in his way, and I throw a bad pass that goes to Pascal Siakam, but then Ben Simmons strips it, and then he finds himself an easy dunk by going baseline. So game is tied now with about 2 minutes left to go. Ben Simmons with his rebound off of the James Harden miss, and then he's taking this one all the way. Defense comes, and then Grant gets this wide open three-pointer. Grant always finds a way to hit clutch shots for us, and I very much appreciate that. CJ gets a good open look off of that screen from Ben Simmons for the mid-range pull-up. That shot right there by Paul George probably shouldn't have gone. It was a weird-looking floater with his defender on his back. OG Anunoby gets this three-pointer right there, which makes it a 4-point game. Paul George plays a foul game, and for whatever reason, the Sixers fan base is chanting MVP. The guy who won the most recent MVP is currently on your team, so I feel that's a tad bit disrespectful. James Harden hits this ridiculous step back as he is prone to do. Paul George hits a couple more free throws. There's a few more after these that I did not include in the footage. And that was kind of all she wrote. We had a 6-point lead on the Raptors. James Harden misses this one. And we walk away with the first W of the season. And Paul George had an amazing first game. 10 for 19 from the field, dropped 30 points rather easily. Ben Simmons didn't really suffer for it, although CJ definitely did. And I simulated a few games after this. Technically, the Raptors game wasn't the first of the season, but whatever. And we actually start the season 8-2. So a very good start. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more MyNBA content like this, and cue the outro music.